if you've been here recently, you know that I've been preaching through the book of Revelation. And I could have decided to stay in the book of Revelation. Would you enjoy that for Mother's Day? Some of you don't care. Some of you have been secretly mad and not said anything. But it is nice to have a diversion sometimes, isn't it? Well, we are in 1 Samuel today, if you want to follow along with me. 1 Samuel 1:21 through 28. First Samuel 1:21 through 28, I'm preaching on a mother's dedication. Now, if you've ever been a mother, or even functioned as a mother, what I mean is, how many of us have ever known people that raise someone else's kids? That happens a lot more than we think sometimes. Could be an aunt, could be a grandma, could be a sister, whatever the situation, but lots of people help raise other people's kids. So that's what I mean. Maybe it's not even your birth child, but you were helping raise a child and you act in a mother role. And then divorces happen too. So sometimes you are in a stepmother role, and that gets even more exciting and challenging, doesn't it? It seems like, because now, yes, there's all that goes along with that, and I probably don't even have to explain. So being a mother or in a mother role takes a lot of effort. And you know what the pay rate is? Well, hopefully there's something, but yeah, the numerical pay rate is, yeah, it's pro bono, right? Because you're doing that out of love, out of dedication. But hopefully the payoff is so much better than money. And I say that because in this country, it's really easy to fixate and obsess about money. And you know, the most valuable memories that we have in our lives probably have nothing to do with money. Have you ever thought about that? Oh, I want a $20 scratch off. That's probably not, well, I hope that's not your best memory in life. It's usually those special times you connect with someone, isn't it? You had a special moment with somebody, a mom, a dad, a brother, sister, significant other, etc. Or maybe you did achieve something, and it wasn't even just that you achieved something, it was that sense that you had worked really hard and now you were getting some reward. It could be a trophy at work, it could be some type of college degree, it could be something else. But the payoff that you get as a mother is something that hopefully is more than any dollar figure could ever compensate you for. Because if you are a mother or have operated as a mother, you don't do it for money. So why do you do it then? Well, there's probably several elements to it, but one of those is dedication. And that dedication usually comes out of a place of love. And we'll look at a lady today who went through a lot of adversity. Now think about this. It's tough to be married, isn't it? You can laugh, but that's the truth. Sometimes things are wonderful, sometimes not so wonderful. Marriages ebb and flow. Sometimes they end. Sometimes they never begin. Do you get what I'm saying? Marriage is tough in and of itself. Now, we're looking at a story a long time ago, so remember, this is not our current culture. Their culture was different. There was a man who had not just one wife, he had two wives. So how many of you know this is geared up to be a good story right here? Man, John's preaching on polygamy on Mother's Day. The new model for Linwood Baptist is not this, just to clarify. Well, there was these two women who were both married to this man, and not to get into all that, I mean, I don't think that model works for us today. It's hard enough just to get one person to stay with somebody else, much less two to stay with one person. But culture back then, maybe that was kind of the normal thing. But anyway, so there's these two wives with this one man, Elkanah. Well, the one lady, Peninnah, she had several children, but Hannah had no children. Now, I don't know if you've ever wrestled with this lady, but I have heard, I don't know firsthand, but I have heard that is a very difficult thing to wrestle with infertility, where you want to have a kid so bad, and for some reason, it's just a struggle. Sometimes you'll hear breakthrough stories. I tried for 10 years, and then at 4 years old, a miracle happened, or whatever, or we did some type of special procedure and it was expensive, but it worked, you know. And then sometimes people just can't for whatever reason. Sometimes they might do foster care or adoption. But anyway, if you want to have a child and you can't you imagine? That's a very painful thing. If I want a baseball, I can go up to Target or Walmart and I can get a baseball. If I want to change jobs, I can probably do that. But what's amazing about life, you can't just boom, create life on demand. Now, some people can, but there are some people that really want a child and just can't have it. So that's kind of the backdrop. Here's a man, he has 2 wives. One wife has a lot of kids, one wife has no kids. So when you go back and look at this situation, we're looking at Hannah's life in particular because the story focuses on Hannah. She could have done a lot of things. She's got a lot of pain in her heart because remember, the other wife is making fun of her. So it's not just she supported, oh, well, I hope you have a kid someday. No, she rubs it in her face that she has kids and Hannah doesn't have kids. Well, so you can only imagine what kind of response you would have had if that was your situation. May have been kind of a difficult one, right? You probably would have wanted to clean her clock and put her in her place. And you know, we could have read right here, and then Hannah whipped out her sword. You know, we didn't read anything like that though. So Hannah's going through suffering and difficulty, but she doesn't react negatively or wrongly. In fact, she actually cries out to God in her suffering. If you go back earlier in the passage, you see how she cries out in 1 Samuel 1:9-11. It says, after they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh, Hannah rose. Now, remember, Shiloh was a place, this was before the temple ever existed. This was before there was monarchs in Israel. The Israelites would frequently go to Shiloh to make a sacrifice. Now, it sounds like Elkanah did it once a year, and Hannah and Peninnah, they would go with him and their family. So they went up to Shiloh. It says, Hannah rose. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. And notice what she did. It says, she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, and I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. So she's saying, God, if you give me what I'm hoping for, I will give him back to you. Well, just to put that in perspective, how many of you have ever given one of your kids away? Does that seem like an easy thing to do? I can't imagine how hard that would be to let go of your son or daughter and say, there you go, they're yours now. But Hannah was saying, I will give you the child that I don't even have yet if you just give me a child. Give me a chance here. Give me a chance to have a kid. And if I have a son, she asked for a son explicitly, and remember that usually there were some female prophets or spiritual leaders back then, but as a general statement, males were looked to for spiritual guidance back then. So she wants a son so that he can enter into the service of the Lord. So she vows this vow, makes a prayer, and then the story proceeds from there. So she's going through suffering. She could have whipped out her sword or, taken the other lady to task, but instead she cries out to the Lord for deliverance. Well, boom, as soon as she prays a prayer, boom, a baby's in her arms. No, it doesn't say that. It says that year after year, Elkanah would go up, make the sacrifices. So we don't know how long, could have been a couple of years, 3 years, could have been 10, 15 years. But imagine if she had tried to have a kid. You know, people got married young back then, most likely. Let's say she got married as a teenager, and 10, 15, 20 years go by. You know, she got married. I don't know if she would have got married at 15, but hey, that kind of stuff happened more commonly back then because that's how culture was. And then now she's 30, 35 years old. Can you imagine trying to have a kid for 15 or 20 years unsuccessfully? That's got to take a toll on you, doesn't it? But she did not give up. She was patient. Every year they would go up and make that journey. And she never gave up. Out of all the things you've ever gone through, has there ever been a time in your life where something took a very long time and did come to pass for 5, 10, 20 years, 30 years, and then it happened? When it did happen, how did you feel about that? Well, hopefully happy, right? Hopefully excited, because the longer the wait, typically the better the reward, right? Our government does that with the lottery system. You want to take $20 million spread out over 20 years, or do you want $1 million right now, or whatever? Oh, I want $1 million right now, right? You ever notice that on these lottery winners? Do you want some massive sum of money, or do you want a small sum of money? But we'll give it all to you right now. What do a lot of people elect? They want it right now. Why is that? Well, I'm a human too. We struggle with being patient, don't we? Oh yeah, I'm patient. Just hurry up and get it done. We do struggle with patience, but Hannah was going through difficult times, and this may have been for years. Oh yeah, look at that other wife over there rubbing it in my face. Look at all her kids. I have no kids. Every year, yeah, we're going up to Shiloh again to make some sacrifices. And if you read into the details, Elkanah sees Hannah crying and says, "Isn't my love for you enough?" And I'm sure he's well-meaning. But if Hannah is desirous to be a mother, yes, the love of Elkanah is great and good, and he obviously cares about her because it says he gave her a double portion when they would go up to Shiloh. But the desire of her heart was to have a child, and she couldn't. Another story of somebody that waited a really long time to have a kid, Sarah. Remember her? Now let's just see, take a little survey. How many of you were 90 when you had a kid? 80? 70? Anything? Is anybody 50? That doesn't happen much, but it does happen occasionally. 40, a little bit more realistic? 30? Nobody's ever had any kids. I mean, did everybody have their kids young, like teenager to 20 something? Okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but you get what I'm saying? People don't have kids a whole lot at 80, 90 years old, and Sarah had a kid, the child of promise, at 90. Well, that's obviously a lot of people who don't believe in the Bible. That's got to be fake, right? That's got to be made up. Nobody has a kid at 90. Hey, if you believe that there's a God that can do all things, that created all the beautiful world around us out of nothing, surely he can make a 90-year-old lady have a baby. Yeah, it's weird for sure. And I'm sure they put that one in the medical journals, right? But hey, Sarah had a baby at 90. So Hannah, I don't know if she was familiar with that story. Hannah would come after Abraham and Sarah. But maybe even just hearing that story, if she was familiar with that, that would have given her some encouragement. That year after year, she hung in there, she cried, she prayed. And then one day, what she had longed for so long came to pass. God gave her a child, and not just any child, a son, which, like I said before, in that culture, from a serving in the tabernacle perspective, that was really important. So God gave her a son. She named him Samuel. And she told her husband Elkanah, as soon as the child is weaned, I will bring him. So remember, they're going to go to Shiloh And Hannah says, no, I'm not going to go right now. I'm going to wait until the child is weaned. And then I will bring him so that he may appear in the presence of the Lord. And notice what she says. And have a nice little visit at the tabernacle. No, she doesn't say that. She says that he may dwell there forever. So I don't know what age they weaned a child back then. Sometimes children get weaned early, several months old, a year old. Maybe, sometimes you might see a little bit older than that, 18 months. But, for sure by 2 years, right? But a lot of people, it's a few months, maybe a year or so, give or take. So we're not talking about a 20-year-old that Hannah's taking up to the temple to drop off and leave. We're talking a baby. A baby. Maybe a year or two old. How many of you could imagine handing away your baby at a year or 2 years old? It'd be tough, wouldn't it? Why was Hannah going to do that? Was it because she was a bad mother? No, actually, it was because she had made a promise to God. God, if you will visit me in my affliction, I will give you this child. And what did God do? He gave her a son. So Hannah suffered. She was antagonized for years. She had to be patient. And when the chance came for her to be faithful, or to do what probably, quite honestly, a lot of us would have done, she did the right thing. Haven't we ever heard this before? Oh, well, I know I made that promise, but that was a long time ago, right? Have we ever heard that before? I know I told you that, but that was a long time ago. We love to get out of stuff that way. That was a long time ago. Hey, if you promise somebody something, that's why they don't make vain promises, because if you're going to promise somebody something, you need to follow through if it's reasonable or able to be done. Such. So Hannah could have said, Eli, you don't remember that old priest up there, he thought I was drunk. Oh, can I? He probably doesn't care. Nobody will notice. So who's holding Hannah accountable? Really? No one. Like if Hannah had just said, we'll just forget that vow ever got made. I mean, obviously God would have known, but on earth, who was there saying, now Hannah, you better give your child up to the service of the Lord? I don't know if anybody was there holding her feet to the fire, but what did she do? She did what was honorable and faithful. She said, okay, here you go. God, I'm going to give this child to you. So it says, oh my Lord, as you live, my Lord, I am the woman who was standing here in your presence praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition that I made to him. Therefore I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he is lent to the Lord. Think about that. She's saying, God, I made a promise to you, I begged you, I pleaded with you, you honored my request, and here I am to honor my side of the bargain. You gave me a child, and I'm going to give it back. Now, if you happen to have a kid in here today, and I don't even mean like a 6-month-old or a year-old or a 2-year-old, you got a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old. What could bring you more joy from that child? Well, my kids aren't that old yet, but I feel like what will bring me the greatest joy is to see them, for one, loving God, making good choices in life, and basically being respectable human beings. That sounds like a simple thing to ask, but that's not as easy as you would think, right? And if you got a kid that's 30, 40, 50, gone down the wrong path, what's the greatest pain in your life? It's not that they didn't have your favorite brand of flour up at Walmart. It's probably seeing your adult kid make bad decisions, isn't it? I'm just being honest here. And there's probably a mixture. Some of you are thinking, thank the Lord my kids are making good decisions. And some of you might be fighting back tears because you know some of yours haven't made the best decision. But you know what? They're adults too, right? You can't blame yourself, not to get too sidetracked on that. Do the best you can. and trust that hopefully they will turn out okay someday. I don't want to get too far down psychology 101, but at some point they're capable of making their own decisions, and you can't carry that burden. But I think it is interesting that Hannah was willing to give up her only child. She didn't have 3 or 4 at home. This wasn't just her favorite child. This was her only child. She was willing to give up her only child. Well, who's going to take care of her when she's old if her only child is down there serving the Israelites, serving God, through the tabernacle? Well, it's not going to be him. She's given up her sense of security. I don't know how much older Elkanah was than her. Do you get what I'm saying? Unless they were just very wealthy, she's not only giving up her only flesh and blood relative on this earth, she's giving up potentially her own sense of security as she gets older. But yet, she was faithful, and she said, God, I'm giving you my most valuable possession. There you go. Listen to this story. I know we watch TV, right? Everybody watches TV. We've got smartphones. It dings every 3 seconds. Oh, yeah, look at that stuff that's obscure. And I really don't need to know, but, I'll stare at my phone anyway. We all get distracted by it. All the Twitter feeds and Facebook posts and whatever. They're having a sale. Oh, yeah. Can you believe it? Stores are having a sale today for Mother's Day. Yeah. Somebody's having a party for the Super Bowl, that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, and some of that stuff's fine. But you know what's more important than going to another sale at Macy's? It's the relationships that we have on this earth. And as a believer, our number one relationship should be with our Creator, because I wouldn't even be alive if I had never had life. And then, okay, in my brokenness, I needed Jesus to save me, which is true for all of us. So yes, on a spiritual level, that's our most important relationship, because really, that's the source of us having a proper love for everyone around us. If Jesus was willing to sacrifice his life for me, oh yeah, when my relative is difficult or my friend is challenging, wow, Jesus laid down his life for me. Maybe I can go a little bit out of my way to help that difficult person. We all like to help the person that helps us, right? Scratch your back, I'll scratch it. What about when you're trying to scratch that person's back and they stab you in the back? Oh, it's a little bit different, isn't it? Our relationships matter. And Hannah was willing to give up perhaps her most precious relationship, on earth at least, because she had made a promise to God, and she kept that promise. God had kept his side of the deal, and she kept her side of the deal. What was her reward? Well, here we are thousands of years later. What are we talking about right now? Her. Pretty amazing, isn't it? Somebody's telling her story thousands of years later. So, maybe you're in here today. Maybe you're a mother. And every time there's a group of people, there are some of you that might be mothers that feel a lot of joy in your children. There might be some of you that struggle with a lot of shame because you just think about your mistakes. You ever do that? Oh man, if I hadn't done that, or if I had made that decision differently, would so-and-so have gone down a different path? Isn't it easy for any of us to do that? The what ifs and the could have, should have. So my encouragement to you is, whether you're on the happy end of the spectrum right now, you're excited and thrilled about your family and all that, or you struggle with your mistakes. Remember, the enemy loves to take anything he can to beat you up. And so if he can hop on the guilt bandwagon, the shame bandwagon, the wish you'd done this bandwagon, if I only not made that decision, or if I made that decision, well, you know what? You can ride that train all day long. Or you can say, God, here I am. all my mistakes, all my victories, all the above. I am giving it all to you today. You know, as a dad, I've probably made some really good decisions. I've probably made some pretty bad ones too. Why is that? Because I'm a human, and that's probably true of every single person that walks the earth. We make some good decisions and some not good decisions. You know what helps me? When I can be honest and say, God, here I am. Beauty, ugly, all of it. Here it is. I'm giving it to you. The surrender helps me feel better. Because I'm realizing there is someone out there bigger than me, more powerful than me. And even if it doesn't magically fix everything, I am letting go of stuff that's out of my control. You've ever done an A or AA or any of that stuff? Probably heard of the serenity prayer, right? We probably all said that at one point in our lives. That's the part that we probably think about sometimes. Grant me the serenity to change, or the things that I can change, and the wisdom to know the difference, or something to that effect. I don't think I said that very well. But basically, there's stuff in your life you will never change. So the sooner you get to a point where you say, God, I can't change that, it actually helps you grow. As we watch enough TV, we always want the happy ending, right? But sometimes what if the happy ending is actually just getting to a place where we say, God, here I am. I'm surrendering myself to you, my difficulties, my victories, all the above. Help me. You're very aware of this if you've been a mother of a little kid. You ever had somebody say, help me, mommy, tie my shoe? Which is kind of cute at first, but then when they're 12, well, my kid's 38. That's a joke. Hannah gives us a good example of not just the dedication she had, even before she was a mother, she was faithful and persevered. But after the fact, she did what probably had to be one of the hardest things in the world you could do as a mother. Gave up her son to live with a priest, and we would probably call it like a monastery or convent. They call it a tabernacle, where you might see temple in there. All right, kid, here you go. The priest is going to raise you now. Not an easy task. But in her case, that probably was a good decision, because she had made a vow before that kid was ever even conceived. God, if you give me a son, he's yours the rest of his life. And she did it. She honored her word. She was faithful. So my encouragement to you today, whether you're mother, father, brother, sister, etc., you're in some type of relationship. How can you be like Hannah? How can I be like Hannah? She persevered through years of being antagonized by her co-wife. I know, right? Maybe you're thinking, man, I'm glad I don't have multiple spouses right here. But she endured years of agony, years of heartbreak, kept trying to have a kid, didn't work. And then finally she did. And she honored God and kept her promise when that came to pass. Are we faithful like that? Do we persevere? It's hard to persevere, but my encouragement to you is keep persevering, doing the right thing. And God, even if it's not in this life, that's the thing we forget sometimes. Even if we don't see a reward in this life, if we're doing the right thing, we will see that reward at some point, because everything we do for God, I believe, has a reward. Let's pray. Thank you, Father, that you are with us. Thank you for the example of Hannah, that she was faithful to you, that she made a promise that was probably a very difficult promise to keep. And yet we know that the story continues that Samuel, her son, grew up to be a mighty prophet who helped shape the future of Israel through Saul and David and probably so many more people. So thank you for her sacrifice, and help us to be faithful to you just as she was. And help us to know you, I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.